Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The alarm pierced the silence at 5:30 a.m., but Bryce was already awake. He'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, listening to Layla's steady breathing beside him, peaceful, unburdened by guilt. The mattress shifted as she rolled away from him, pulling the covers with her. Even in sleep, she created distance. Bryce slipped out of bed and headed to the bathroom, his bare feet silent against the hardwood floors. The house, a sprawling four-bedroom he'd spent 15 years paying for, felt more like a prison with each passing day. In the mirror, his reflection told the story of the last 3 months. Deeper lines around his eyes, more gray in his dark hair, shoulders tensed as if preparing for a blow. His phone lay heavy in his pajama pocket. He pulled it out, opening the folder where he kept the screenshots. The messages between Layla and Reed played out like scenes from a cruel play. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. He doesn't suspect a thing. Thursday, same time, same place. Each message was time-stamped, documented, backed up. 3 months of evidence, carefully collected while he maintained the facade of the trusting husband. The bathroom door creaked open behind him. God, Dad, do you have to hog the bathroom every morning? Simone stood in the doorway, 18 years old and already mastering her mother's look of disdain. Her long dark hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour. She'd always been meticulous about appearances, just like Layla. Good morning to you too, Simone. Bryce tucked his phone away, but not before catching his daughter's sharp glance at the screen. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. Just hurry up. Some of us actually care about how we look. The barb was familiar, a daily reminder that in his children's eyes, he was nothing more than an embarrassment. He stepped past her, noting how she pressed herself against the door frame to avoid contact with him. Did I in the kitchen? Nathan was already at the breakfast bar, scrolling through his phone while sipping expensive coffee Bryce's salary paid for. At 21, his son had perfected the art of looking perpetually bored with everything around him. Morning, son. Nathan grunted without looking up. His designer watch, another gift Bryce had worked overtime to afford, glinted under the kitchen lights. Bryce began his morning routine. Coffee, toast, pretending everything was normal. Through the kitchen window, he could see Reed's car parked 2 blocks down. It had become a familiar sight every Thursday morning, like clockwork. Today was Thursday. Mom says she needs to talk to you tonight, Nathan said suddenly, still not looking up from his phone. Try not to make it difficult for her. The toast turned to ash in Bryce's mouth. Does she? Yeah. Now Nathan did look up, his expression a mirror of Layla's when she was about to spring a trap. She's got some pretty big news. Try to be progressive about it. Footsteps on the stairs announced Layla's arrival. She swept into the kitchen like a queen entering her court, already dressed for success in a form-fitting dress that probably cost more than Bryce made in a week. Good morning, family. She kissed Nathan's cheek, then Simone's as she entered behind her mother. Bryce noticed she didn't even glance his way. Morning, Mom. Both children chorused, their tones warming instantly. Bryce, Layla acknowledged him finally. We need to have a family meeting tonight. Something important to discuss. She poured herself coffee, her red nails clicking against the ceramic. You'll be home by 6? I'm always home by 6, he replied quietly. Good. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Because this really can't wait any longer. Simone and Nathan exchanged knowing looks. Whatever their mother was planning, they were clearly already in on it. The weight of Bryce's phone seemed to grow heavier in his pocket. I should get to work, he said, standing up. Of course you should, Layla replied smoothly. Always the responsible one, aren't you? The children snickered, sharing another look that spoke volumes about their opinion of their father's predictability. Bryce rinsed his coffee cup, placed it in the dishwasher, and grabbed his briefcase. As he headed for the garage, he heard Layla's voice drift after him. Don't be late tonight, honey. What I have to say? Well, it's going to change everything. If she only knew how right she was. The garage door opened to reveal another perfect suburban morning. Reed's car was still there, 2 blocks down waiting. Bryce wondered if he was watching the house, waiting for him to leave so he could steal another moment with Layla. The thought should have hurt more than it did. But after 3 months of knowledge, the pain had dulled to a hollow ache as he backed out of the driveway. He caught a glimpse of his family through the kitchen window, Layla holding court at the breakfast bar, their children hanging on her every word, all 3 of them laughing about something probably him. The perfect family portrait, if you didn't look too closely at the cracks in the frame. Everything changes tonight, he murmured to himself as he drove away. Just not the way you're planning, Layla. Bryce's office at Morgan & Associates felt like a sanctuary compared to home. Here, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial reports, he could pretend his life wasn't crumbling. The morning light filtered through Venetian blinds, casting strips of sunlight across his desk where a family photo still stood, a relic from happier times. Or perhaps just times when he'd been more ignorant. His phone buzzed. Another message from Layla. Don't forget about our talk tonight. It's important. He set the phone face down on his desk, turning instead to his computer. The divorce papers were already drafted, sitting in an encrypted folder labeled Contingency. His lawyer, Marcus, had helped him prepare everything over the past month. Hey, Bryce. Tom from accounting stuck his head in. We're doing lunch at Giovanni's. Want in? Not today, Tom. Got some things to finish up here. Man, you work too hard. Tom lingered in the doorway. Everything okay at home? You've seemed different lately. Bryce managed a smile that felt mechanical. Everything's fine, if you say so. Tom shrugged. Oh, hey, wasn't that your wife I saw at Riverside Cafe yesterday? Around 2? Bryce's fingers stilled on his keyboard. Yesterday at 2? She was supposed to be at her yoga class. Yeah, thought it was her. With some guy tall, athletic type. They seemed pretty. Tom trailed off, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Never mind. I'm sure it was someone else. After Tom left, Bryce opened his bottom drawer. Inside was a manila envelope containing photos from the private investigator he'd hired. The latest batch showed Layla and Reed at various locations. The Riverside Cafe, the boutique hotel on 5th Street, the secluded parking spot 2 blocks from their house. Each photo was dated, each one a nail in the coffin of his marriage. His desk phone rang. Mr. Davidson? Your son is on line 1. Put him through. Bryce braced himself. Dad? Nathan's voice dripped with his usual condescension. Mom wants to know if you can come home early. Around 4 instead of 6. I have work to finish, Nathan. God, you're so inflexible. This is important to her. To all of us, actually. Bryce thought of the times Nathan had covered for his mother, the lies his son had helped craft. All of you? So you know what this is about? A pause. Just come home early, okay? And try not to be so you about it. The line went dead before Bryce could respond. He stared at the phone, remembering when Nathan was small, when he'd look at his father with admiration instead of contempt. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. His cell phone buzzed again. This time it was Simone. Mom's really nervous about tonight. Don't make it worse by being difficult. The irony almost made him laugh. They were all so concerned about his reaction, yet none of them had considered that he might already know, that their carefully orchestrated intervention might backfire spectacularly. AT 3:30. Another text from Layla. Coming home early? We really need to talk. Bryce replied for the first time that day. I'll be home at 6, as usual. The response was immediate. Fine. Be that way. But what I have to say can't wait much longer. He closed his eyes, remembering the first time he'd suspected something was wrong. It had been subtle at first. Late nights at work, new clothes, a sudden interest in fitness classes. Then the phone calls that she'd taken another room, the passwords changed on her devices, the way she'd turned her screen away when he entered a room. The evidence had accumulated slowly, like poison in his bloodstream. Each discovery had hurt less than the last, until finally, he felt nothing but a cold clarity about what needed to be done. His office phone buzzed again. Mr. Davidson? Your daughter's on line 1. Not now, he said quietly. I'm busy. He spent the next 2 hours finalizing details. The new security system was scheduled for installation tomorrow. His bank accounts had been separated. The locks would be changed tonight. Everything was in place. AT 5:45, he packed his briefcase, including the manila envelope of photos. In the parking lot, he sat in his car for a moment, watching the sun sink behind the city skyline. His phone had 17 missed messages, a mixture of texts from Layla, Simone, and Nathan, all pushing for him to come home early, all trying to manipulate him into compliance with their plan. The drive home felt surreal, like moving through a dream. Or maybe a nightmare. The streets were familiar, but somehow different, as if he was seeing them for the last time as a married man, the last time as a father who still played a role in his children's lives. No matter how much they despised that role, that Reed's car was gone from its usual spot, but Bryce knew he wouldn't be far. Not tonight. Not when Layla was finally planning to bring their affair into the open, dressed up as a mutual decision to open their marriage. That as he turned onto his street, he saw all the lights were on in his house. They were waiting for him, his family of vipers, ready to strike. But this time, he was ready too. This time, he had venom of his own. Bryce pulled into the driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. Through the living room windows, he could see his family's silhouettes. Layla pacing, Nathan lounging in an armchair, Simone perched on the sofa's arm. They were arranged like actors on a stage. Waiting for their cue, he took his time gathering his briefcase and the manila envelope, each movement deliberate. The weight of his phone felt reassuring in his pocket. All the evidence safely backed up. Ready to shatter their carefully constructed performance, the front door opened before he could reach for his keys. Simone stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Finally, Mom's been waiting forever. It's 6 o'clock, Bryce said quietly, stepping past her. Just like always. The living room fell silent as he entered. Layla stopped pacing, smoothing down her dress, a new one, he noticed. Probably bought with Reed's money, or maybe his. These days, it was hard to tell which man was funding her adventures. Bryce. Layla's voice held that silky quality she used when she wanted something. We need to talk. All of us, as a family. A family discussion. He set his briefcase down carefully. How nice. Nathan snorted from his armchair. Try not to be so dramatic, Dad. Mom's got something important to say. I'm sure she does. Bryce remained standing, watching as Layla settled onto the sofa like a queen preparing to address her subjects. Honey, she began, patting the space beside her. Come sit. This is important. I prefer to stand. Simone rolled her eyes, returning to her perch on the sofa's arm. God, you're already making this difficult. Just listen to what Mom has to say. Layla shot their daughter a warning glance before turning back to Bryce, her expression carefully arranged into one of concerned understanding. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us. About our marriage. Have you? The manila envelope felt heavy in his hands. Yes. And I've realized something. She leaned forward, her expensive perfume another new addition filling the air between them. We've become stagnant. Stagnant, Bryce repeated, watching her face. Interesting choice of word. Don't you feel it too? Layla stood, moving closer to him. The way we've fallen into this routine, this conventional box that society puts relationships in. Nathan made a sound of agreement. It's the 21st century, Dad. People don't have to live like it's the 1950s anymore. And what century would you prefer we live in, son? Bryce's voice remained steady. The one where children help their mothers deceive their fathers? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Nathan's face, quickly replaced by his usual arrogance. What's that supposed to mean? Let's focus on what I'm trying to say, Layla interrupted smoothly. I've been reading about modern relationships, talking to friends who've made similar choices. And I think... She paused for dramatic effect. I think we should consider opening our marriage. The words hung in the air like smoke. Bryce watched as his children exchanged knowing smiles, their expressions a mixture of superiority and anticipation. They clearly rehearsed this moment, planned every detail of how their pathetic father would react to their mother's proposition. Opening our marriage, he said slowly. And what exactly does that mean to you, Layla? She brightened, mistaking his question for interest. It means freedom, Bryce. The chance for both of us to explore, to experience passion again. No more shame, no more hiding. No more hiding, he repeated. That must be appealing to you. Come on, Dad, Simone interjected. Mom's trying to be honest with you. The least you could do is appreciate that. Honest? The word tasted bitter on his tongue. Tell me, Simone, how long have you known about your mother's honesty? What? Simone's confidence wavered slightly. Bryce continued, his voice still calm. How long have you known about Reed? The room went deathly silent. Layla's carefully constructed mask slipped for just a moment, showing raw panic beneath. Nathan sat up straighter in his chair, while Simone's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. Layla recovered quickly. This isn't about any specific person. This is about us, about our future. Our future. Bryce opened the manila envelope slowly. Would that be the future you've been planning with Reed at the Riverside Cafe? Or perhaps at the boutique hotel on 5th Street? Dad, you're being paranoid, Nathan cut in. But his voice had lost its edge. Bryce began laying photos on the coffee table, one by one. Layla and Reed entering the hotel. Layla and Reed at the cafe. Layla and Reed in his car, 2 blocks from their house. Each photo was dated. Each one a nail in the coffin of their lies. How? Layla's voice trailed off. 3 months, Bryce said quietly. I've known for 3 months. Every Thursday morning, every late night at work, every yoga class. I've watched you lie to my face while our children helped you cover your tracks. It's not what you think, Layla began, but Bryce cut her off. Then what is it, Layla? Explain it to me. Explain how our daughter helped you pick out lingerie for another man. Explain how our son ran interference when Reed's wife almost caught you. Explain how you turned our children into accomplices in your betrayal. You had no right to spy on me. Layla's mask cracked completely, showing the fury beneath. And you had no right to make our children into liars, Bryce replied. But here we are. This is exactly why Mom needs someone else, Simone spat, but her voice trembled. You're suffocating her with my what, Simone? My trust? My loyalty? My love? Bryce turned to his daughter. Tell me, when did you become so comfortable with deception? When did you decide it was okay to help destroy your father's marriage? Don't you dare make her feel guilty, Layla snapped. This is about us, not the children. No, Layla, this is about all of us. About how you've poisoned our family with your selfishness. About how you've taught our children that loyalty means nothing. That love is a weakness to be exploited. That's not fair, Nathan protested, but he couldn't meet his father's eyes. Isn't it? Bryce pulled out his phone, pulling up the screenshots of messages between Layla and Reed. Should I read these aloud? The ones where you joke about how pathetic I am? Where you plan your meetings while I'm at work, earning the money that pays for your affair? Stop it, Layla whispered. Or maybe the ones where our children help you coordinate your schedules? Where they laugh about keeping your secret? Bryce's voice remained steady, even as he watched their faces crumble. Is this the kind of honesty you wanted to discuss tonight? The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Gone was the superior confidence, the practiced manipulation. In its place was the heavy weight of exposed lies, of consequences looming on the horizon. What do you want? Layla finally asked, her voice small. Want? Bryce looked at each of them in turn. His wife, his children, these strangers who wore familiar faces. I want you to pack your things. All of you. Tonight. What? Simone's voice rose to a shriek. You can't throw us out, Nathan protested. This is our home. No, Bryce corrected him. This is my home. The home I paid for while you all conspired against me. The locksmith will be here in 30 minutes. By midnight, I want you gone. You're bluffing, Layla said, but fear had crept into her voice. Check your phone, Bryce told her. My lawyer sent the divorce papers an hour ago. The house is in my name. You're all adults. I have no legal obligation to house any of you. Dad, please, Simone started, tears forming in her eyes. Save your performance, Simone. You've all made your choices. Now you can live with them. He turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving them in stunned silence. Behind him, he could hear Layla beginning to cry, could hear Nathan cursing under his breath. But for the first time in months, Bryce felt nothing but peace. The consequences they'd never expected had finally arrived. The master bedroom felt different now, as Bryce methodically packed Layla's belongings. Each item told its own story of deception. The red dress she'd worn to business dinners with Reed, the lingerie hidden in the back of her drawer, the jewelry box containing gifts he'd never given her. He worked with mechanical precision, folding each piece of clothing, each memory of betrayal, into the expensive suitcases she'd bought for their 20th anniversary trip, a trip she'd canceled at the last minute. Claiming work obligations downstairs, he could hear the chaos erupting. Simone's voice rose in hysteric bursts, while Nathan's deeper tones rumbled with threats and protests. Layla's voice cut through it all, switching between anger and pleading, a sound he'd grown too familiar with over the years. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:45 p.m. Through the bedroom window, Bryce watched the locksmith's van pull into the driveway, right on schedule. The shouting from downstairs intensified. "You can't do this." Simone's voice carried up the stairs. "We live here. We have rights." Bryce continued packing, remembering the day Simone was born. He'd held her tiny hand in his, promising to protect her, to teach her right from wrong. Somewhere along the way, Layla's influence had twisted those lessons, turned their daughter's sharp mind toward cruelty instead of kindness. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Nathan burst into the bedroom, his face flushed with rage. "Stop this right now," he demanded, trying to snatch a handful of Layla's clothes from Bryce's hands. "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Bryce's voice remained calm as he continued folding. "Tell me, Nathan, how many times did you lie to my face about your mother's whereabouts? How many times did you help her coordinate her meetings with Reed?" "That's not. I didn't." Nathan's confidence faltered. "She wasn't happy. You never made her happy. And that justifies betrayal?" Bryce met his son's eyes. "Is that what I taught you about being a man? About honor? About family?" "Don't talk to me about family." Nathan spat, but his voice wavered. "You're the one throwing us out." "No, son. You threw yourselves out. Every lie, every cover-up, every mockery of my trust, those were your choices. These are just the consequences." "Dad, please." Simone appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Where are we supposed to go?" "You're both adults," Bryce replied, zipping up another suitcase. "You've made adult decisions, helping your mother deceive me. Now you can face adult consequences." "This is insane." Layla's voice preceded her into the room. She looked wild, her perfect makeup smeared, her carefully crafted composure shattered. "You can't just throw away 22 years of marriage." "I didn't throw it away, Layla. You did. One lie at a time, one betrayal at a time, one lesson in dishonesty for our children at a time." The locksmith's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Mr. Davidson, where would you like me to start?" "The front door," Bryce called back. "Then the back, garage, and all external access points." "You're really going through with this," Nathan said, his voice small for the first time since childhood. "You're really throwing us out?" "Yes." Bryce closed the final suitcase. "I am." Layla grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "What about everything I've given you? The best years of my life. Raising your children. Raising them to be what, Layla? Accomplices? Liars? Is that what you're proud of? Don't you dare judge my parenting." She released him as if burned. "I've been a good mother." "A good mother doesn't teach her children to deceive their father." Bryce lifted 2 suitcases. "A good mother doesn't make them complicit in her affairs." "Stop saying that word." Simone covered her ears. "It wasn't an affair. It was, what was it, Simone?" Bryce asked quietly. "What do you call it when you help your mother buy lingerie for another man? When you lie to your father's face about where she is? When you laugh at his trust behind his back?" The questions hung in the air, unanswered. Downstairs, the sound of drilling filled the silence as the locksmith began his work. "I've called you both Ubers," Bryce continued, addressing his children. "Nathan, yours will take you to your apartment. Simone, yours will take you to your boyfriend's place." He turned to Layla. "I assume Reed's available to pick you up?" "How dare you?" Layla began, but her phone buzzed, interrupting her. The color drained from her face as she read the message. "Let me guess," Bryce said softly. "Reed's not interested now that there's actual consequences involved? Now that it's not just a thrilling secret anymore?" Layla's silence was answer enough. Outside, the first Uber pulled into the driveway. "That's yours, Nathan," Bryce said, checking his phone. "I suggest you start packing. You have 2 hours before the new locks are installed." "Dad!" Nathan's voice cracked, sounding young again. What about my stuff? My room? Pack what you need tonight. I'll have the rest shipped to your apartment tomorrow. Bryce met his son's eyes. Consider this your first lesson in real consequences. Simone began to sob in earnest now, her carefully applied makeup running down her face. Daddy, please? I'm sorry. We're sorry. No, Simone. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. Bryce turned back to the suitcases. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get your mother's things downstairs before her car arrives. My car. Layla's voice rose. What car? The taxi I called for you. I assumed you wouldn't want to wait around while the locks are changed. The reality of their situation seemed to finally hit them. Nathan stumbled backward, then turned and rushed to his room, the sound of drawers being yanked open following in his wake. Simone stood frozen, tears falling silently now, while Layla sank onto the bed they'd shared for over 2 decades. 22 years, she whispered. You're throwing away 22 years? No, Layla. Bryce lifted the suitcases again. You threw them away. One Thursday morning at a time, he carried the bags downstairs, past the locksmith who was efficiently replacing the front door locks, past the family photos that would soon be taken down, past the life he'd spent decades building and protecting. Outside, he could see curious neighbors beginning to peek through their windows. Drawn by the unusual activity at the Davidson house, let them look, he thought. Let them see what consequences really looked like. The night was just beginning. The locksmith worked steadily as the evening deepened into night. The sound of his tools provided a steady backdrop to the chaos of departure. Doors slamming, voices rising and falling, the occasional crash of something being dropped in haste. Bryce stood in his study, watching through the window as Nathan loaded his car with whatever he could fit, his son's usual swagger replaced by frantic movements that Simone's boyfriend had arrived to help her pack, his presence adding another layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. Bryce could hear him in the hallway, whispering what he probably thought were comforting words. Babe, it's okay. You can stay with me. Your dad's just having a breakdown or something. If only it were that simple. Layla paced the living room downstairs, her phone pressed to her ear as she made call after call. Her voice drifted up in fragments. Please, I just need... No, I understand, but just for a few nights. Each conversation ended the same way, with rejection. Her carefully cultivated social circle was rapidly discovering the difference between entertaining someone's affair and dealing with its messy aftermath. The doorbell rang again. This time it was the security company, arriving to install the new system Bryce had ordered. He led them through the house, pointing out where he wanted sensors placed, while his family continued their frenzied packing around them. Dad! Nathan stood in the study doorway, his face a mixture of anger and something else, fear perhaps. My TV won't fit in my car. I'll have it delivered tomorrow, Bryce replied without turning around. To my apartment? The one you know I can barely afford on my entry-level salary. Now Bryce did turn. The one I've been subsidizing with monthly deposits? Yes, that apartment. Though those deposits will be stopping now, of course. The color drained from Nathan's face. You can't. I can't. Can't what, son? Can't live on your own money? Can't face the consequences of your choices? Bryce's voice remained steady. Welcome to adulthood. A crash from somewhere in the house made them both turn. Simone's voice rose in a wail. My mirrors. I can't carry all my mirrors. Leave them, Bryce called out. I'll have everything shipped tomorrow. But where? Simone appeared beside Nathan, her mascara creating dark rivers down her cheeks. Where are you going to ship it? I live in the dorms. Not anymore, her boyfriend interjected. You'll live with me now. Bryce watched as his daughter's face shifted, reality beginning to sink in. The boyfriend's apartment was half the size of her bedroom here, and he'd heard enough of their fights to know it wasn't the stable solution Simone was pretending it would be. The security technician appeared in the doorway. Sir, we're ready to program your new codes. I'll be right there. Bryce checked his watch. 10:30. The locksmith was finishing up, the security system was almost complete, and his family's exodus was nearly done. Layla appeared behind their children, her perfect composure completely shattered. Reed won't answer my calls, she said, her voice hollow. No one will answer my calls. The taxi should be here soon, Bryce replied. A taxi? To where? She laughed, a brittle sound. In case you've forgotten, I don't have anywhere to go. That sounds like a problem you should have considered before suggesting an open marriage to cover your affair. The security technician coughed uncomfortably and slipped past them, heading back to the control panel. Nathan and Simone exchanged glances, their superior attitudes finally cracking under the weight of consequence. What about our phones? Nathan asked suddenly. Our car insurance? Our credit cards? All in my name, Bryce confirmed. All being canceled at midnight. The reality of their situation seemed to hit them all at once. Layla sank into a chair, while Simone began to cry again. Nathan just stood there, looking young and lost for the first time in years. The sound of a car horn drew their attention. The taxi had arrived. That's your ride, Layla? Bryce nodded toward the front door. Your suitcases are already on the porch. Bryce, please. She stood, reaching for him. We could talk about this. We can work something out, like an open marriage. He stepped back from her reach. No, Layla. We're far beyond that now. The security technician reappeared. Systems ready, sir. Would you like me to demonstrate how it works? In a moment, Bryce turned to his family. No, his former family. It's time for you to go. They stood frozen, as if waiting for him to change his mind, to show weakness, to be the pushover they'd always counted on him being. Instead, he walked past them to the front door and opened it wide. The taxi driver was already loading Layla's suitcases into his trunk. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden Bryce had planted when they'd first moved in. How many summer evenings had he spent tending those flowers while his wife met her lover? How many times had his children watched him work in that garden, laughing at his dedication while keeping their mother's secrets? Your Uber's next, Simone, he said quietly. Nathan, you should finish loading your car. They moved as if in a daze, the last of their belongings clutched in their arms. Layla stood on the porch, staring at the taxi, as if it were a hearse come to collect her old life. When you realize what a mistake this is, she said, her voice shaking, it'll be too late. It was too late the first time you met Reed, Bryce replied. You just didn't know it then. The taxi driver honked again, impatient. Layla took one last look at the house, then walked down the path she'd walked thousands of times before. But this time, she wouldn't be coming back to. Simone's Uber pulled up as the taxi pulled away. She stood by the car, clutching her purse like a shield. Daddy, goodbye, Simone. He turned away from her plea, facing Nathan instead. You should go too. It's getting late. Nathan opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. Without another word, he walked to his car, got in, and drove away. Simone's Uber followed shortly after. Leaving Bryce alone on the porch of his empty house, the security technician cleared his throat. Ready for that demonstration, sir? Bryce nodded, following him back inside. As the technician explained the new system's features, Bryce's phone buzzed with messages he wouldn't read, calls he wouldn't answer. His family was learning their first lesson in consequences, but it wouldn't be their last later. After both the locksmith and security technician had gone, Bryce stood in his silent house. The rooms felt larger somehow, cleaner, as if the absence of lies had physically cleared the air. He walked from room to room, turning off lights, straightening furniture, erasing small traces of the chaos that had preceded this moment at Iana's study. He opened his laptop and sent a brief email to his lawyer, confirming that everything had gone as planned. Then he poured himself a glass of whiskey and settled into his chair to wait. Soon, Layla would return from her thwarted rendezvous with Reed, expecting to find a way in, expecting another chance to manipulate and control. Instead, she would find her belongings on the porch, the locks changed, and her careful world of lies finally, irrevocably shattered. Bryce raised his glass to the darkness beyond his window. He didn't need to see her arrival to know how it would play out. Her shock, her anger, her desperate attempts to salvage what she'd destroyed, none of it would matter now. The time for lies was over. The time for consequences had begun. The digital clock on Bryce's desk clicked over to 11:45 p.m. when he heard the first knock. Soft at first, then increasingly desperate. He remained in his study, sipping his whiskey, listening as Layla's composed facade cracked one blow at a time. Bryce! Her voice carried through the door, tight with forced control. Open the door. We need to talk about this like adults. He set his glass down and moved to the window. From his vantage point, He could see her standing on the porch, still wearing the dress she'd chosen for her evening with Reed. Her hair, so carefully styled earlier, now hung in disheveled strands around her face. The knocking became pounding. "I know you're in there. You can't just throw away 22 years like this." Bryce pressed the intercom button by his desk, part of the new security system. "The divorce papers explain everything, Layla. I'm sure your lawyer will contact mine in the morning." "My lawyer?" She laughed, a hysterical edge creeping into her voice. "I don't have a lawyer. I don't have anything. Reed won't even answer my calls." "That must be disappointing," Bryce replied calmly. "Almost as disappointing as discovering your wife's affair." A new voice joined the commotion, deeper male. "Reed." "Layla, get in the car. This isn't helping anything." Bryce moved back to the window. Reed stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his athletic frame tense with discomfort. Even from this distance, Bryce could see the man's reluctance to get involved now that the situation had lost its exciting secrecy. "You came back." Layla spun toward Reed, relief flooding her voice. "I knew you wouldn't abandon me. Tell him. Tell Bryce we're in love. Tell him this isn't just some affair." Reed took a step backward, raising his hands. "Look, Layla, this has gotten out of hand. I never promised you anything. We had fun, but what?" Her voice rose sharply. "What about everything you said? About us being soulmates? About me deserving better than him? That was—" Reed glanced uncomfortably at the house. "That was different. This is too complicated now." Bryce pressed the intercom again. "Is there a problem, Reed? You seemed much more confident when you were sneaking around with my wife behind my back." Reed's head snapped up toward the study window. "Listen, man, I never meant for any of this to what?" Bryce cut him off. "To have consequences? To affect real people's lives? What exactly didn't you mean to happen when you started sleeping with a married woman?" "Dad!" Nathan's voice joined the scene. Bryce watched his son's car pull up to the curb. "Mom's not answering her phone. Is she?" He stopped short at the sight of Reed. "What's he doing here?" "Leaving," Reed said quickly, backing toward his car. "This is between you and your family, Layla. I'm sorry, but I can't be involved in this." "Can't be involved?" Layla's voice cracked. "We're already involved. You told me you loved me." "I said a lot of things," Reed muttered, reaching for his car door. "Heat of the moment, you know? But this is too much drama for me." Nathan started up the steps toward his mother, but stopped when he saw the suitcases. "What's going on? Why are your things out here?" "Your father," Layla's voice dripped with venom, "has lost his mind. He's throwing away everything we built together over one little indiscretion." One little Bryce's laugh carried through the intercom. "How many Thursdays, Layla? How many lies? How many times did you make our children complicit in your betrayal?" Reed's car engine roared to life. Layla spun toward the sound, her composure shattering completely. "Reed, don't you dare leave me here. Don't you dare!" But the car was already pulling away from the curb, leaving Layla standing between her suitcases and her son, watching as her carefully constructed world continued to crumble. "Mom?" Nathan's voice had lost its usual arrogance. "What's he talking about? How many Thursdays?" "It doesn't matter," Layla snapped, turning back to the door. "None of it matters. Bryce is just being dramatic. He'll calm down. He'll see reason. He has to." "No, Layla." Bryce's voice came through the intercom one final time. "I don't have to do anything anymore. You, Nathan, Simone, you all made your choices. Now you're living with them." "Choices?" Nathan looked between the door and his mother. "Mom, what exactly did we? What did you make us part of?" Layla's shoulders sagged. "Not now, Nathan. Just help me with these suitcases. We need to figure out where we're going to stay tonight." "Stay?" Nathan's voice rose. "What do you mean, stay? Can't you fix this?" "Fix it?" Layla laughed bitterly. "Your father's made up his mind. He's punishing all of us because he can't handle a modern relationship." "Modern relationship?" Bryce's voice carried a sharp edge now. "Is that what you call lying to your husband while your children help cover your tracks?" Nathan took a step back from his mother. "We weren't. I didn't know it was—" "Of course you knew," Bryce interrupted. "Every time you gave her an alibi, every time you helped her coordinate her meetings, every time you laughed at my trust, you knew exactly what you were doing." "I thought." Nathan's voice faltered. Mom said you were suffocating her, that you were old-fashioned, that she needed. Needed what? Bryce asked quietly. Needed to destroy her family? Needed to turn her children into accomplices? What exactly did she need that was worth all this? The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Nathan stared at his mother as if seeing her for the first time, while Layla continued to pound on the door with increasingly desperate force. You can't do this, she screamed. You can't just throw us away. I didn't throw anyone away, Layla. You did that yourself. One lie at a time, one betrayal at a time. Bryce's voice was steady through the intercom. Now take your things and go. The security system arms automatically at midnight. Anyone still on the property after that will be considered trespassing. Trespassing? Layla's voice rose to a shriek. This is my home. Not anymore, Bryce replied simply. Check your email. The divorce papers spell everything out quite clearly. Nathan reached for his mother's arm. Mom, come on. We need to figure this out. You can stay at my place tonight. Your place? Layla turned on him. That tiny apartment you can barely afford? The one your father's been subsidizing. Ben, what? Nathan's face paled. What do you mean, subsidizing? Oh, you didn't know that either? Layla's laugh was brittle. Your father's been paying half your rent. Just like he's been paying for Simone's car, your insurance, your phone bills. Everything you thought you were managing on your own? That was all him. And all of it stops at midnight, Bryce added through the intercom. Welcome to independence, son. I hope those Thursday night lies were worth it. The security lights began to flash, a 1-minute warning before the system armed itself. Nathan looked up at them, then back at his mother, uncertainty written across his face. We need to go, he said quietly. Mom, please. Just come with me. We'll figure something out. Layla stood frozen on the porch, staring at the door as if she could force it open through sheer will. The security lights continued their warning flash, counting down the seconds until this chapter of their lives officially ended. Layla, Bryce's voice came through the intercom one final time. It's over. Take your things and go. In the distance, a clock began to strike midnight. The next morning found Layla pacing Nathan's small apartment, her designer heels clicking against the cheap laminate flooring. The space that had seemed merely quaint during her occasional visits now felt suffocating. Boxes of her belongings crowded the already limited space, and the sofa where she'd spent the night did nothing to help her aching back. I can't believe he canceled all the credit cards, she muttered, staring at her phone. 22 years of marriage, and he just cuts me off. Nathan sat at his tiny kitchen counter, staring at his own phone. He canceled everything, Mom. My rent assistance, my car insurance, my phone plan, it's all gone. I just got the notifications. He can't do this to us. Layla spun toward her son. Call him. He'll listen to you. I tried. Nathan's voice cracked. He's blocked our numbers. All of them. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Layla rushed to open it, hope flaring in her eyes, but it was only Simone. Their daughter stood in the hallway, her usual perfect appearance notably disheveled. I can't stay at Marcus's anymore, Simone announced, pushing past her mother into the apartment. He's being impossible. What happened? Nathan asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Simone threw herself onto the crowded sofa. He says I'm too high maintenance now that Dad's cut me off. Can you believe it? He actually suggested I get a job to help with rent. A job? Layla's voice dripped with disgust. You're a student. You can't be expected to. I'm not even that anymore, Simone interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. The university bursar's office called. Dad was paying my tuition directly. Without his payments, I'm going to be dropped from all my classes. Layla sank into the only remaining chair, her composure slipping. This is just temporary. He's trying to teach us a lesson, but he'll come around. He has to. Will he? Nathan's voice had lost its usual confidence. You didn't see his face yesterday, Mom, when he was talking about all the Thursdays, all the lies. Don't you dare blame this on me. Layla snapped. Everything I did for all of us. To break free from his controlling, old-fashioned knock at the door cut her off. Nathan opened it to find his landlord, a heavy-set man with a perpetual scowl. Mr. Thompson, Nathan started, but the landlord cut him off. Rent's due today, Davidson. Full amount this time. None of that half-payment arrangement you had with your father. Nathan paled. Mr. Thompson, if I could just have a few days to. You have until 5 p.m., the landlord interrupted. After that, I start eviction proceedings. Your father already called to cancel his payment arrangement, so don't think you can talk your way around this. After he left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Nathan turned to his mother and sister, his face ashen. I can't afford the full rent, he whispered. I barely made half on my salary, and now with the car insurance due too. This is ridiculous. Layla grabbed her phone again, dialing another number. After a moment, she spoke with forced cheerfulness. Amanda, darling, I need a tiny favor. Nathan and Simone watched as their mother's face fell, listening to the one-sided conversation. No, I understand. Of course, your guest room is... Yes, I know it's short notice. No, I completely understand. She ended the call, then immediately dialed another number. And another. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial warmth followed by awkward excuses and quick goodbyes. Your father's been busy, she said finally, her voice hollow. He's called everyone. Told them everything. Everything. Simone sat up straighter. About Reed? About all of it, Layla confirmed. The affair, the lies, how you both helped cover it up. He's made sure everyone knows exactly what we did. Nathan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then swore softly. The dealership just called. They're repossessing my car this afternoon. The payments were coming from Dad's account. He's systematically destroying us, Layla whispered, real fear creeping into her voice for the first time. Everything we have, everything we are, he's taking it all away. No, Mom, Simone said quietly. He's just stopping us from taking anything else from him. Before Layla could respond, her phone lit up with a message. Her hands shook as she read it. Reed, she said, her voice small. He's blocking my number. Says his wife found out. Says he can't. He can't have any contact with me anymore. His wife. Nathan's voice cracked. Did Dad? Of course he did. Layla laughed bitterly. He probably called her first. Told her everything. How else could he make sure Reed would abandon me completely? The apartment fell silent except for the sound of traffic outside. Traffic that now included a tow truck pulling up to collect Nathan's car. What are we going to do? Simone asked, watching through the window as the tow truck operators approached the vehicle she'd once mocked her father for making Nathan drive. Where are we going to go? I don't know, Layla admitted, her carefully maintained facade finally cracking completely. I don't know anything anymore. Nathan's phone buzzed again. Another notification of a canceled service, another piece of their privileged life being stripped away. He looked at his mother, really looked at her, seeing past the designer clothes and perfect makeup to the desperate woman beneath. Mom, he said slowly, what exactly did you expect to happen? When you started seeing Reed, when you had us lie for you, what did you think the endgame would be? I didn't... Layla's voice faltered. I never thought he'd... Your father was always so passive, so accepting. I never thought he'd actually stand up for himself. Simone finished, her voice sharp. Actually make us face consequences? Another knock at the door made them all jump. This time, it was the apartment complex's maintenance man. Sorry to interrupt, he said, not sounding sorry at all, but we need to change the locks. Owner's orders. Change the locks. Nathan stepped forward. But I live here. Not after 5 p.m. you don't. Mr. Thompson was clear. No rent, no apartment. And since your father called to cancel the lease guarantee, the maintenance man's voice faded into background noise as reality continued to crash down around them. Layla watched as her children's faces crumpled, their confident facades finally breaking under the weight of consequence. I did this, she whispered, more to herself than to them. I broke everything. Outside, the tow truck's engine roared to life, taking Nathan's car away. Inside, the maintenance man began changing the locks on what would soon be their former apartment. And somewhere across town, in the house she called home for 22 years, Bryce was systematically dismantling every safety net they'd ever taken for granted. The reckoning was only beginning. Marcus's apartment felt smaller every time Simone entered it. She stood in the doorway, watching her boyfriend scroll through his phone, her last bag clutched in her trembling hands. The past week had stripped away every certainty she'd ever known. And now, even this relationship was crumbling before her eyes. "I just don't get what you expect me to do," Marcus said without looking up. "I can't afford to support you. Hell, I can barely afford my own bills." "I'm not asking you to support me," Simone protested, though they both knew that's exactly what she'd been doing. "I just need some time to figure things out." Now Marcus did look up, his handsome face twisted with irritation. "Time? It's been a week, Simone. You haven't even looked for a job." "A job?" She felt her face flush. "I'm a student. I'm supposed to be focusing on my education." "You're not a student anymore," he reminded her coldly. "Your dad made sure of that when he stopped paying your tuition. Welcome to the real world, princess." The nickname that had once sounded affectionate now dripped with contempt. Simone watched as Marcus stood up, moving to the kitchen where another woman's coffee mug sat in the sink, a detail she'd been trying to ignore since she noticed it that morning. "Look," he said, leaning against the counter, "let's be real. This thing between us? It worked when you were the rich guy's daughter, when everything was easy. But now?" He shrugged. "I'm not interested in being someone's meal ticket. Is that all I was to you?" Simone's voice cracked. "Someone with a rich father? What else were you?" Marcus's honesty was brutal. "You've never worked a day in your life. You mock people who have to actually earn their way. Hell, you helped your mom cheat on your dad and thought it was funny. Why would I want someone like that long term?" Each word hit like a physical blow. Simone sank onto the couch. Her designer purse, one of the last remnants of her old life, clutched to her chest like armor. "There's someone else, isn't there?" she whispered, glancing at the coffee mug again. Marcus didn't bother denying it. "Jessica. She works at my gym, has a real job, pays her own bills, doesn't need daddy's credit card to survive." The door opened behind them, and a pretty blonde in workout gear stepped in. She barely paused at the sight of Simone, offering only a small smirk before moving to kiss Marcus. "Your stuff still here?" Jessica's voice was sugar-sweet poison. "I thought you were leaving today." Simone stood on shaky legs, her last shreds of dignity threatening to desert her. "I was just going." "Great." Jessica moved to the kitchen, picking up her coffee mug. "Because I'm moving in this weekend. We'll need the closet space." The walk to her car, her father's car, really, and probably not hers for much longer, felt like a march of shame. Her phone buzzed as she reached it. A text from Nathan. "Emergency. Meet at the diner on 5th. Bring mom." 20 minutes later, Simone found herself sliding into a booth across from her brother and mother. Nathan's usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a defeated slump that matched their mother's disheveled appearance. "I lost my job," he announced without preamble. "Dad called them." "He what?" Layla's hand shook as she set down her coffee cup. "He can't do that. That's harassment." "All he did was tell them the truth." Nathan laughed bitterly. "About how I helped cover up an affair. About how I lied repeatedly to my supervisors about why I needed time off. Turns out, companies don't like employing people with a proven track record of dishonesty." "He's destroying us," Layla whispered. "Piece by piece, he's taking everything." "No, Mom," Simone cut in, surprising herself with her bitterness. "We destroyed ourselves. Every time we lied for you, every time we helped you sneak around, we were destroying ourselves. Dad's just making sure we understand what we broke. Don't you dare blame this on me." Layla's voice rose, drawing stares from nearby diners. "Everything I did because he was suffocating me. Because he wasn't enough." "Wasn't enough?" Nathan's laugh was harsh. "He paid for everything, Mom. My apartment, Simone's tuition, your shopping sprees. He worked 60-hour weeks so we could have everything we wanted. How exactly wasn't that enough?" Before Layla could respond, her phone buzzed. Her face crumpled as she read the message. "The country club," she said, her voice hollow. They've revoked my membership. Apparently, they have certain moral standards that I no longer meet." "Join the club," Simone muttered. "Marcus just threw me out. He's already replaced me with someone who has a real job and pays her own bills." "He what?" Layla's outrage on her daughter's behalf would have meant more if it wasn't so clearly self-serving. "After everything you've done for him?" "What exactly have I done for him, Mom?" Simone asked quietly. "Spent his money? Mocked his job? Treated him like he was beneath me, just like we treated Dad. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Nathan stared into his coffee cup, avoiding their eyes. I have to be at work in an hour, he said finally. I thought you lost your job, Layla said. My real job, yeah. Nathan's face flushed. I'm washing dishes at Carlos. It's all I could get on short notice. Turns out my degree doesn't mean much without Dad's connections backing it up. Washing dishes? Layla looked horrified. But you're a Davidson. You can't. I'm not anything anymore, Mom. Nathan cut her off. None of us are. Everything we were, everything we had, it was all because of Dad. And we threw it away for your affair. Don't call it that, Layla snapped. It wasn't just an affair. Reed and I Reed? Simone laughed bitterly. Reed won't even take your calls anymore, Mom. He got what he wanted. The thrill of sleeping with a married woman. Now that there are consequences, he's gone. Just like Marcus. Just like all our so-called friends. Your father did this, Layla insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. He's turned everyone against us. No, Nathan stood up, pulling on the cheap uniform shirt he'd hidden in his bag. We did this. Every lie, every betrayal, every time we helped you sneak around, we did this to ourselves. Dad's just making sure we can't hide from what we've become. He dropped a few crumpled bills on the table, tips from his first shift washing dishes. That's all I can contribute. I have to go or I'll be late. Can't afford to lose another job. They watched him walk away, his proud shoulders now bent under the weight of consequence. Simone turned to her mother, really seeing her for the first time in years. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. Was Reed worth all of this? Layla stared at her reflection in the diner window, at the smeared makeup and haunted eyes that had replaced her usual perfect appearance. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know anything anymore. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. In one of those shadows, Nathan's figure grew smaller as he walked toward his new life, a life stripped of privilege and pride, a life he'd helped create with every lie he'd told. The reckoning continued, and it showed no signs of mercy. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and lost dreams. Layla sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at her reflection in the spotted mirror. Her designer clothes, once a source of pride, now seemed like costumes from a play that had ended abruptly. Her phone lay silent beside her, a reminder of how quickly a social circle could evaporate. That a knock at the door made her jump. Mom? It's me. She opened the door to find Simone, looking as displaced in the dingy motel corridor as Layla felt in the room. Her daughter carried a small paper bag from the diner where she'd just started waitressing. I brought you something to eat, Simone said, stepping inside. She wrinkled her nose at the room. How long can you stay here? 3 more days, Layla replied, taking the bag. That's all I can afford with what's left on my last credit card. After that, she let the sentence hang unfinished. You could try calling Amanda again, Simone suggested, though they both knew it was futile. I did. Layla sank back onto the bed. She said her husband doesn't want someone like me around their children. Someone who'd betray her family like that. Simone sat in the room's only chair, its vinyl covering cracked with age. Have you heard from Reed at all? Don't. Layla's voice cracked. Just don't mention him. Why not? He's the reason we're all here, isn't he? The great love affair that was worth destroying everything for. You don't understand, Layla began, but Simone cut her off. No, Mom, I think I'm finally starting to understand perfectly. Reed was never going to leave his wife for you, was he? He just wanted the excitement, the thrill of sneaking around. And we helped you give it to him. The truth of her daughter's words hung heavy in the musty air. Outside, a car door slammed, and voices drifted up from the parking lot. Happy voices, normal voices, voices that belonged to people whose lives hadn't imploded. I saw Dad today, Simone said quietly. Layla's head snapped up. What? Where? Did he say anything about? I was serving his table at the diner, Simone continued. He was with someone, a woman. The paper bag crumpled in Layla's hands. A woman? Who? What did she look like? Professional. Put together. Everything we used to be. Simone's laugh was bitter. She looked at me like I was invisible. Just another waitress. And Dad. Dad looked happy, Mom. Really happy. He's doing this to punish us, Layla whispered. Dating someone new, flaunting it in front of you. No, he was just having lunch. I'm the one serving tables now, because I helped destroy his marriage. Simone stood up abruptly. I have to get back to work. My break's almost over. Work? Layla spat the word like it was poison. My daughter, a waitress. What would your father say? He'd probably say it's an honest job. Nathan's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his dishwashing uniform, looking exhausted, which is more than we can say about anything we did before. Nathan. Layla brightened. Did you bring? No, Mom, I didn't bring any money. I can barely afford gas to get to work. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. But I did bring news. Remember Elizabeth from Dad's office? His secretary? Layla's lip curled. What about her? She's not his secretary anymore. She's been promoted to regional manager. The position Dad was going to recommend me for before. He let the sentence trail off. The silence that followed was deafening. Layla stared at her children, her once proud, confident children, who now wore cheap uniforms and exhaustion like ill-fitting clothes. I have to get back to my shift, Simone said finally. Maybe I could bring you some leftovers tomorrow, Mom? Leftovers? Layla's voice rose. Is this what we've become? Scraping by on leftovers and living in motels? No, Mom. Nathan's voice was tired. This is what we've earned. Every lie, every betrayal, every time we helped you meet Reed, this is exactly what we earned. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the thin walls, they could hear the motel manager arguing with someone. The words became clearer as the voices approached their door. I don't care if she's got 3 days left on her payment, the manager was saying. The card company just called. It's fraudulent use. She's not authorized on the account anymore. Layla's face went pale. The last credit card, the one she'd kept hidden from Bryce all these years. The emergency card she'd thought would save her, it had finally been canceled. The knock on the door was sharp, authoritative. Ms. Davidson? We need you to vacate the room immediately. Simone and Nathan looked at their mother, really looked at her, seeing not the confident, sophisticated woman who'd taught them to mock their father's values, but a desperate woman who'd gambled everything on an affair and lost it all. What are you going to do? Simone whispered. Layla stared at her reflection again, at the smeared mascara and fading highlights, at the designer clothes that now felt like a costume she no longer deserved to wear. I don't know, she whispered back. I don't know anything anymore. The manager knocked again, harder this time. Outside, the sun was setting on another day in their new reality. A reality where actions had consequences, where lies had price tags, and where the comfortable life they'd taken for granted had slipped away like water through their fingers. Time to go, Mom, Nathan said quietly. Time to face what we've done. They gathered her few remaining belongings as the manager continued to knock. Through the window, they could see police cars pulling into the parking lot. Called, no doubt, about the credit card fraud. The reckoning had found them again. And this time, there was nowhere left to hide. The late evening sun cast long shadows across the park where Layla sat on a bench, her last designer handbag clutched to her chest. Her children had offered their couches. Nathan, in his new studio apartment on the wrong side of town. Simone in the cramped room she now shared with another waitress. She'd refused both. Pride, her constant companion through the years, wouldn't let her see their complete fall from grace. The sound of familiar laughter drew her attention. Across the park, Bryce was walking with the woman Simone had mentioned. Elegant, professional, genuinely happy. They paused by the fountain, where Layla had once met Reed for secret rendezvous. The irony wasn't lost on her. Look at him, she muttered to herself. Acting like he's won something. But he has won, hasn't he? Nathan's voice made her jump. He stood behind the bench in his dishwashing uniform, having just finished another double shift. He's free of us? Free. Layla's laugh was brittle. Is that what you call destroying your family? We destroyed the family, Mom. Nathan sank onto the bench beside her. Every time we lied for you, every time we helped you meet Reed, every time we mocked Dad for trusting us, we were the ones swinging the hammer. Across the park, Bryce and his companion had stopped at a food truck, the kind of casual dining Layla had always considered beneath them. They looked comfortable together, natural in a way Layla suddenly realized she and Bryce had never been. I ran into Reed's wife at the grocery store, Nathan said quietly. Where I was buying ramen noodles, because it's all I can afford now. Layla stiffened. What did she say? Nothing. She didn't have to. She was with Reed, shopping for their daughter's birthday party. He wouldn't even look at me. Nathan's laugh was hollow. Funny how fast people forget you when you're not useful anymore. The park was filling with after-work couples and families, people whose lives hadn't imploded in spectacular fashion. Layla watched as a young mother pushed a stroller past them, deliberately averting her eyes, another former friend, choosing to forget their existence. Simone called. Nathan continued. Marcus is engaged to that gym trainer. They're having an engagement party at the country club, the same club that revoked your membership. She deserves better than him anyway, Layla snapped, but the words sounded empty even to her. Does she? What exactly did we teach her to deserve? How to lie? How to betray people who love her? How to use people until they're not useful anymore? Before Layla could respond, her phone buzzed, a rare occurrence these days. She grabbed it eagerly, then deflated as she read the message. The divorce is final, she whispered. Just like that, 22 years gone? Not just like that, Nathan corrected. After months of lies. After turning your children into accomplices. After teaching us that love and loyalty mean nothing compared to what we want in the moment. Across the park, Bryce and his companion were leaving, their easy laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Layla watched them go, remembering when she used to be the one walking confidently through the park, turning heads, enjoying the envy of others. I saw the house today, Nathan said softly. Dad's renovating it. New colors, new landscaping erasing every trace of us. He can't erase 22 years, Layla protested weakly. Can't he? Look around, Mom. Look at what's left of the life we had. Nathan gestured to her designer handbag, the last remnant of her former status. Everything we were, everything we had, it was all built on his hard work, his trust, his love. And we treated it like it was nothing. A group of business people walked past their bench, several of them former colleagues who now pretended not to see them. Their conversation drifted back. Did you hear about Bryce Davidson? His company's expanding into 3 new regions. Yeah, and I hear he's dating that new regional manager, the one who worked her way up from secretary. Good for him. After what his ex-wife did, Layla flinched at each word, each reminder of their new reality. Nathan stood up, brushing off his uniform. I have to go. Early shift tomorrow. At the restaurant? Layla couldn't keep the disdain from her voice. No, Mom. At the convenience store. I picked up a second job. He looked down at her, his former arrogance replaced by tired wisdom. That's what people do when they don't have someone else paying their bills anymore. They work. As Nathan walked away, Layla noticed a newspaper someone had left on the bench. The business section was open, displaying a photo of Bryce at a charity gala. The woman was with him, both of them looking polished and happy. The caption read, Davidson Industries CEO announces expansion, credits fresh start for company success. Fresh start. The words mocked her as the sun set on another day in her new reality. Across the park, couples and families headed home to their normal lives, their secure futures, their unbroken worlds. But home for her now was a series of motel rooms. Paid for with borrowed money and dwindling favors, her phone buzzed again. Simone, this time, got your message. Sorry, Mom, but I can't lend you any money. Tips barely cover my rent, and I'm trying to save for community college classes. Maybe try calling Reed again. But they all knew Reed would never answer. He had his comfortable life back, his family intact, his reputation unmarred by their affair. She was just another mistake he could pretend never happened. The park lights began to come on, casting harsh fluorescent light on her designer clothes that now felt like costumes from someone else's life. In the distance, she could still see Bryce and his companion walking away, their figures growing smaller as they headed toward his house. Their former house. The home she'd thrown away for a few thrilling moments with a man who discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. Excuse me, ma'am? A park security guard approached her bench. The park closes at sunset. You'll have to leave. Layla stood, clutching her handbag, the last piece of her old life. Of course. I was just leaving, but they both knew the truth. She wasn't just leaving the park. She was leaving behind every pretense that her life would somehow return to normal, that her choices hadn't permanently altered her reality, that the consequences of her actions weren't exactly what she'd earned. The reckoning was complete, and there was no going back. The coffee shop buzzed with morning activity as Simone wiped down tables, her waitress uniform already stained with the day's first spills. Through the front window, she watched expensive cars drive past, the kind she used to ride in back when her father's money still cushioned her from reality. "Table 6 needs more coffee," her co-worker, Jenny, called out. "And your mom's back again?" Simone turned to see Layla sitting in her usual corner booth, wearing what had once been a designer outfit but now showed signs of wear. These visits had become routine, her mother appearing during slow hours, nursing a single cup of coffee for as long as possible, watching her daughter serve others with a mixture of shame and resentment. "I'll handle it," Simone sighed, grabbing the coffee pot. As she approached her mother's table, the bell above the door chimed. Simone froze as Bryce walked in, accompanied by Catherine, the former secretary who'd become both regional manager and a constant presence in his life. They were deep in conversation, not noticing Layla in her corner or Simone with her coffee pot. "The merger looks promising," Catherine was saying. "The board's impressed with how you've turned things around. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're not carrying dead weight," Bryce replied, his voice carrying clearly in the morning quiet that Layla's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Dead weight," she muttered. 22 years of marriage, and that's what he calls it. "Mom," Simone warned quietly, "don't start." "Simone?" Bryce had noticed them. He stood straighter, his expression neutral. "I didn't realize you worked here." 3 months now," Simone replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Since the diner closed." Catherine touched Bryce's arm gently. "We can go somewhere else if you prefer." "No need," he said firmly. "We have nothing to be uncomfortable about." Layla's chair scraped against the floor as she stood. "Nothing to be uncomfortable about? You destroyed our lives, and you stand there like, I destroyed nothing." Bryce cut her off, his voice cold. "You did that yourself. With Reed's help, of course." "How is Reed, by the way? Still not taking your calls?" "You had no right." Layla's voice rose, drawing attention from other customers. "Calling his wife. Ruining my reputation." "Your reputation?" Bryce laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the reputation you built on lies? The one you taught our children to help you maintain?" "Dad, please," Simone whispered, aware of her manager watching from behind the counter. "I need this job." The simple desperation in her daughter's voice seemed to pierce Layla's anger. She sank back into her chair, the fight draining from her. "Still playing victim, Layla?" Catherine's voice was professionally neutral. "Still refusing to accept the consequences of your choices?" "Choices?" Layla's laugh was bitter. "What choice did I have with a husband who provided everything?" Bryce finished for her. "Who worked 60-hour weeks so you could shop and socialize. Who trusted you until you proved, repeatedly, that you didn't deserve that trust." "Mr. Davidson?" The manager approached their table. "Is everything all right here?" "Everything's fine," Bryce assured him. "We were just leaving." He turned to Catherine. "There's a better place a few blocks down." "Running away again," Layla called after them. "Like you ran from our marriage?" Bryce turned back, his eyes hard. "No, Layla. Running away is what you did into Reed's arms, into lies, into teaching our children that betrayal is acceptable as long as you don't get caught." He looked at Simone. "I'm sorry if this causes problems with your job." "It's fine," Simone mumbled, though they both knew it wasn't. "I'll figure something out. I always do now." The bitterness in her voice made Bryce pause. For a moment, Simone saw a flicker of the father who used to comfort her after nightmares, who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd loved her unconditionally before she'd thrown that love away. "You know," he said quietly, "the company's always looking for entry-level positions. People who want to work their way up, like Catherine did." "Really?" Hope flared in Simone's eyes, but Layla's harsh laugh extinguished it. "So that's your game?" Layla stood again, swaying slightly. "Trying to turn my daughter against me like you turned everyone else?" "Mom, stop," Simone pleaded. "Just stop." "No, let her continue," Catherine said calmly. Let her show everyone here exactly why she's sitting alone in a coffee shop, watching her daughter wait tables instead of attending the university her father paid for. The manager cleared his throat again. Ms. Davidson, I've warned you before about causing scenes. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Leave? Layla's voice rose again. You're throwing me out? Do you know who I am? Yes, the manager replied firmly. You're the woman who's about to cost her daughter another job if she doesn't leave right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Simone stared at the floor, her cheeks burning with shame. Bryce watched as his ex-wife's facade cracked completely, revealing the desperate woman beneath. Fine, Layla grabbed her worn purse. I don't need this. I don't need any of you. She turned to Simone. Are you coming? Coming. Simone looked up, disbelief on her face. Coming where, Mom? To another motel? Another friend's couch? Another story about how everyone else is to blame for what we did. What we did? Layla's voice cracked. I did what I had to do. I was suffocating in that marriage, dying inside while Dad what? Simone cut her off. While he worked to give us everything. While he trusted us. While we helped you destroy his life because it was fun to feel superior. Bryce's hand touched her shoulder gently. The entry-level position is yours if you want it, Simone. No strings attached. Just hard work like everyone else who starts at the bottom. Layla's laugh was almost hysterical. The bottom? We're Davidsons. We don't start at the bottom. No, Mom, Simone said quietly. You're not a Davidson anymore. And I haven't earned the right to be one either. She turned to her father. But I'd like to try. To earn it, the right way this time. The look that passed between father and daughter spoke volumes. Behind them, Catherine smiled slightly, while Layla's face crumpled with the realization that she was losing the last piece of her old life. You'll regret this, she whispered, backing toward the door. All of you. You'll see what you've thrown away. No, Mom, Simone called after her. We already know exactly what we threw away. The difference is I'm finally ready to admit it was our fault. The bell chimed again as Layla fled into the morning sunshine, leaving behind a daughter who was finally choosing a different path, an ex-husband who had found strength in consequences, and the tattered remains of the lies she'd built her life upon. The reckoning wasn't over. It was just beginning its final act that Nathan's hands were raw from scrubbing pots, the harsh industrial soap doing nothing to ease the burning. The kitchen of Antonio's Pizza was a far cry from the corporate office where he'd once expected to build his career. 8 hours into a 12-hour shift, he barely noticed the ache anymore. Davidson, the kitchen manager's voice cut through the clatter of dishes. Phone call. Nathan dried his hands on his apron, already knowing who it would be. Only one person still called him here regularly. Mom. He sighed into the receiver. I'm working. Your sister betrayed me. Layla's voice was slurred slightly, a common occurrence these days. She's working for him. For your father. I know, Mom. She told me yesterday. Nathan watched as his co-workers prepared pizzas, remembering when he used to mock people who worked in food service. She's trying to build a future. A future. Layla laughed bitterly. Betraying her mother for minimum wage? That's not a feature. It's not minimum wage, Nathan corrected her. It's an entry-level corporate position. She's starting where everyone else starts, at the bottom. The bottom. His mother's voice rose. We're Davidsons. We don't start at the bottom. No, Mom. We're not Davidsons anymore. Dad made that pretty clear when he destroyed us. Layla cut in. When he turned everyone against us. When he finally made us face consequences. Nathan finished firmly. Look, I have to go. These dishes won't wash themselves. Dishes? The disgust in her voice was palpable. My son, washing dishes? This is what your father has reduced us to. Before Nathan could respond, a commotion erupted at the front of the restaurant. He looked up to see Reed walking in with his family, his wife and daughter laughing at some private joke. The sight of the man who'd helped destroy their lives made Nathan's stomach turn. I'll call you back, he said into the phone. Hanging up before his mother could protest, Reed hadn't noticed him yet, too focused on being the perfect family man. Nathan watched through the kitchen window as they were seated, as Reed pulled out his wife's chair with practiced gallantry, the same charm he'd used to seduce Layla. Table 12's orders up, the cook called out. Davidson, run this out? Nathan stared at the pizzas, then at his dishwater-soaked uniform. I'm not supposed to do service. Runner called in sick. The cook shrugged. Unless you want to explain to the boss why you can't help out. The threat was clear. Nathan grabbed the pizzas, his face burning as he pushed through the kitchen doors. He could avoid Reed's table, just serve these quickly, and get back to, well, look who it is. Reed's voice carried across the restaurant. Nathan Davidson. Though I guess it's just Nathan now, isn't it? Nathan froze, the pizzas heavy in his hands. Reed's wife turned, her eyes widening with recognition before narrowing in contempt. Their daughter, about 12, looked confused by the tension suddenly filling the air. Who is he, Daddy? She asked. Nobody, sweetheart. Reed's wife answered before her husband could. Just the son of a woman your father used to know. Used to know? Nathan's voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the now silent restaurant. Is that what you call it when you help destroy a family? Reed's face flushed. Now listen here. No, you listen? Nathan set the pizzas down at their intended table, then turned to face the man who'd helped ruin their lives. You want to pretend you were just someone my mother used to know? Fine. But we both know what you really are. I don't think. Reed started, but Nathan cut him off. You're right. You don't think. You didn't think about the lives you were destroying, about the family you were helping tear apart, about the children whose trust you were helping betray. That's enough. Reed's wife stood up. We're leaving. I won't sit here and be insulted by the help. The help. Nathan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what's funny? 6 months ago, I would have looked down on someone like me too. Would have mocked them, just like I mocked my father for trusting us. Karma's a real thing, isn't it? Is everything okay here? The manager appeared, looking nervously between Nathan and the customers. No, Nathan said quietly. Nothing's been okay since this man helped my mother destroy our family. But you don't have to fire me. I quit. He untied his apron, letting it fall to the floor. Reed's daughter was staring at him with wide eyes, while her mother tried to hustle her toward the door. Reed himself sat frozen, his face a mixture of anger and shame. You know what the worst part was? Nathan said, addressing Reed directly. It wasn't losing our money, or our status, or even our family. It was realizing that people like you, people we helped, hurt others, people we thought were so exciting and sophisticated, you're actually the weakest ones of all. That's enough. Reed stood up finally, his chair scraping back. You have no right to... To what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what my father did? Told everyone the truth about what we'd done, about who we really were? Nathan looked at Reed's wife. Did he tell you how many times I helped cover for them? How many lies I told to help them meet? How many times I laughed at my father's trust? Reed's wife grabbed her purse. We're leaving. Now. Running away again. Nathan called after them as they hurried toward the door. You're good at that, aren't you, Reed? Running away when things get real. The restaurant had gone completely silent, every customer watching the scene unfold. Nathan turned to his manager, who stood with his mouth open. I really do quit, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. For everything. For who I used to be, for what I helped do, for bringing this drama into your restaurant. The manager's face softened slightly. You're a good worker, Nathan. Despite everything, I can give you a reference. Thanks. Nathan managed a small smile. But I think it's time I stopped hiding in kitchens and started facing what I did. Really facing it. He walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight, leaving behind another job, another piece of his new life. His phone buzzed another call from Layla, no doubt. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel the need to answer instead. He pulled up his father's number. He stared at it for a long moment, remembering the last time they'd spoken, remembering all the things he'd left unsaid. The phone rang 3 times before Bryce answered. Nathan? Dad? Nathan's voice cracked slightly. I think I'm ready to talk. Really talk. About everything we did. Everything I did. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. I'm listening, Bryce said finally, and for the first time since their world had imploded, Nathan began to tell the truth. The charity gala at the Grand Hotel was in full swing when Layla made her entrance. Her once designer dress, now slightly worn at the seams, hung loose on her frame. She'd spent her last money on a ticket, knowing Bryce would be here, Knowing this was her final chance to reclaim some piece of her old life, the security guard at the door frowned at her ID. "Ma'am, this invitation is from Mrs. Davidson." "That's me," Layla insisted, forcing a smile. "Mrs. Davidson." "Layla?" Catherine's voice cut through the awkward moment. She stood just inside the doorway, elegant in a blue evening gown. "You're not welcome here." "Not welcome?" Layla laughed, the sound brittle. "I was hosting galas like this when you were still fetching coffee, remember? And now I'm running 3 regions of the company while you're crashing parties." Catherine's voice remained professional, controlled. "How times change." Before Layla could respond, Bryce appeared beside Catherine. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo, success and confidence evident in every line of his bearing. The sight of him so completely transformed from the husband she'd mocked made Layla's breath catch. "What are you doing here, Layla?" His voice was tired rather than angry. "I came to talk sense into you." She stepped forward, swaying slightly. "Look at what you've done to us. To your family." "My family?" Bryce's eyebrow raised. "You mean the wife who betrayed me? The children who helped her do it? That family?" The security guard moved closer, but Bryce waved him off. Around them, party guests were beginning to stare, whispering behind their hands. Many of them were former friends who now pretended not to know Layla. "Mom." Simone's voice joined the confrontation. She stood near the entrance in a simple but elegant dress, an employee badge clipped to her clutch. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" Layla's voice rose. "What are you doing here? Working for him? Betraying me like everyone else?" "I'm working for myself," Simone corrected her. "Starting at the bottom, learning the business properly. Like I should have done years ago, instead of helping you destroy everything." "Destroy?" Layla's laugh was almost hysterical. "I was suffocating. Your father was what?" Nathan's voice cut in. He appeared beside his sister, wearing a suit that wasn't designer, but was clean and pressed. "Working 60-hour weeks to give us everything? Trusting us when we didn't deserve it." Layla stared at her children, standing with their father, united against her. "So, this is how it ends? All of you against me?" "No, Mom," Simone said quietly. "This is how it begins. Me in the mailroom, Nathan in customer service. Learning the business from the ground up, like everyone else." "The ground up?" Layla spat the words. "We're Davidsons. We don't start at the bottom." "You're not a Davidson anymore." Bryce's voice was firm. "And they haven't earned the right to be Davidsons yet. But at least they're trying to earn it honestly this time." The whispers around them grew louder. Layla recognized faces in the crowd. Country club members who'd revoked her membership, social circle friends who'd blocked her calls, people who'd once competed for her attention and now looked through her as if she were invisible. "You did this." She pointed a shaking finger at Bryce. "You turned everyone against me." "No, Layla." Catherine stepped forward. "You did this. Every lie you told, every betrayal you orchestrated, every time you taught your children that deceit was acceptable, you did this to yourself. And what would you know about it?" Layla turned on her. "The secretary who climbed her way into my life?" "I know about hard work," Catherine replied calmly. "About earning things instead of taking them. About respecting people instead of using them." "Mom," Nathan's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to leave. Before security has to remove you." "Remove me?" Layla's voice cracked. "Your own mother?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Just like Dad removed us from his house when we proved we couldn't be trusted. Sometimes love means facing consequences." Tears began to streak Layla's carefully applied makeup. "Reed will see," she whispered. "He'll realize what we had was real. He'll come back." "Reed?" Bryce laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Reed's wife just made partner at her law firm. They're renewing their vows next month. He's deleted your number and changed his gym to avoid running into you." The truth of his words seemed to physically strike Layla. She staggered slightly, reaching for support that wasn't there. "Security." Catherine called softly. "Please escort Ms. Andrews out." "Andrews?" Layla's voice rose again. "I'm Mrs. Davidson." You're nothing." Bryce cut her off, his voice final. "Nothing but the consequences of your own choices." As security moved to take her arms, Layla looked desperately at her children. Simone? Nathan? Are you really going to let them do this to your mother? We're not doing anything to you, Mom, Simone said softly. We're just finally stopping you from doing things to us. The security guards began to guide Layla toward the exit. She struggled briefly, then sagged in their grip. You'll regret this, she called back. All of you. When you realize what you've thrown away, we already know exactly what we threw away, Nathan interrupted. Our integrity, our self-respect, Dad's trust. We're just finally trying to earn some of it back. The last glimpse they had of Layla was her being helped into a taxi, her once proud bearing now bent under the weight of reality. Inside the gala, life quickly returned to normal. Glasses clinked, music played, business continued. Are you both okay? Bryce asked his children quietly. No, Simone admitted. But we're getting there. One day at a time, one honest choice at a time. Catherine touched Bryce's arm gently. The investors are waiting to discuss the European expansion. He nodded, then looked at his children. The mailroom closes at 5, Simone. Customer service needs those reports by Wednesday, Nathan. No special treatment. We wouldn't want it anymore, Nathan said firmly. We've had enough of taking the easy way out. As Bryce and Catherine moved away to join the investors, Simone and Nathan watched their father. Not the man they'd once mocked for his trust, but the man who'd finally taught them the true meaning of consequences. Do you think Mom will ever understand? Simone asked quietly. No, Nathan replied, straightening his non-designer tie. But maybe that's not our problem anymore. Outside, the taxi carrying Layla disappeared into the night, taking with it the last vestiges of a life built on lies. Inside, her children turned back to their new reality, one built on hard work, honest choices, and the long road to redemption. The reckoning was complete. The rebuilding had begun. 1 year had passed since the night of the gala. The Davidson Industries headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as Bryce walked through the lobby, employees nodding respectfully as he passed. The company had doubled in size under his leadership, expanding across 3 continents. Success, it seemed, flourished in the absence of toxic relationships. Morning, Mr. Davidson. The new receptionist greeted him. Your daughter left these reports for your review. Bryce accepted the stack of papers, noting Simone's neat handwriting on the cover page. She'd worked her way up from the mailroom to junior analyst in record time, not through family connections, but through dedication and honest effort. Is Nathan in yet? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Since 7, the receptionist confirmed. He's presenting to the customer service team this morning. Something about improving response metrics. The elevator ride to his office gave Bryce time to reflect on how much had changed. Catherine waited for him there, already reviewing the morning's contracts. The London office called, she said, looking up with a smile. The merger's going through. We're now the largest firm in 3 markets. Speaking of London, Bryce set down his briefcase. Did you see the email from Amanda? About Layla? Catherine's expression turned serious. Yes. Apparently, she's tried to contact several of our European partners, claiming insider knowledge of the company. Let me guess. In exchange for financial support. Exactly. She's burned through her last connections here. So now she's trying overseas. Catherine handed him a report. The latest photos aren't pretty. She's been seen outside Reed's office again, making scenes. Dad. Simone stood in the doorway, her business attire a far cry from the designer clothes she used to wear. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know Mom called the analyst desk this morning. Bryce sighed. What did she want this time? The usual. Money, her old life back, another chance to explain. Simone entered the office fully, closing the door behind her. She was drunk, Dad. At 9 in the morning. I heard about that call. Nathan's voice joined them as he entered through the connecting door. His customer service team leader badge caught the morning light. She tried my department too. Said she could provide valuable intelligence about the company's inner workings. As if she ever knew anything about how the company actually worked, Catherine observed. That's just it, Nathan said, taking a seat. She never cared about the business, about what Dad was building. She only cared about what it could give her. A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist entered with a concerned look. I'm sorry, Mr. Davidson, but there's a situation in the lobby. Ms. Andrews is here, demanding to see you. Through the office windows, they could see Layla being blocked by security. Her appearance was shocking. Designer clothes, now obviously knockoffs. Her once perfect hair disheveled. Her makeup applied with an unsteady hand. I have a right to be here. Her voice carried through the building. This was my life too. My company too. Should I call the police? The receptionist asked quietly. Bryce watched as his ex-wife created another scene, noting how none of it touched him anymore. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, all of it had been replaced by a simple acceptance of reality. No, he said finally. Let me handle this. He took the elevator down to the lobby, Catherine and his children following behind. The security guards parted as he approached Layla, who stood swaying slightly in her knockoff heels. Well, she slurred. The great Bryce Davidson finally descends from his tower. Come to gloat. Why are you here, Layla? Why am I here? This was my life, my world, until you turned everyone against me, until you poisoned my own children. Mom, stop. Simone stepped forward. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? Layla laughed wildly. Look at you, working like common people, starting at the bottom, betraying your own mother. We're working honestly, Nathan interrupted. Something we should have learned years ago, instead of helping you destroy everything good in our lives. Good. Layla spat the word. You call that suffocating marriage good? Those old-fashioned values? That blind trust supported you for 22 years, Bryce said quietly. That old-fashioned marriage gave you everything you ever wanted, until it wasn't exciting enough. Until Reed offered you a few thrills in exchange for your soul. Don't you dare mention his name. Tears began to streak Layla's makeup. He loved me. He understood me. Did he? Catherine's voice was professional but cutting. Is that why he's filed 3 restraining orders? Why his wife's law firm has warned you to stay away? Why he crosses the street when he sees you coming? You. Layla turned on Catherine with fury. The secretary who stole my life. The executive who earned her position, Bryce corrected. The woman who understands that respect is earned, not taken. The partner who builds instead of destroys. Security guards had moved closer, ready to intervene. Around them, employees tried to pretend they weren't watching, but the scene was impossible to ignore. I want my life back, Layla whispered, her voice breaking. My children, my status, my world. That world never really existed, Simone said gently. It was built on lies, Mom. On betrayal. On teaching us that love and loyalty meant nothing compared to what we wanted in the moment. But I'm your mother. Your family. No, Nathan stepped forward. Family doesn't teach children to betray their father. Family doesn't mock trust and honesty. Family doesn't destroy itself for a few cheap thrills with someone else's husband. Layla's legs seemed to give out. She sank onto a lobby chair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Where am I supposed to go? That's not our problem anymore, Bryce said firmly. You made your choices, Layla. Every lie, every betrayal, every lesson in dishonesty, you taught our children those were your choices. These are your consequences. Security will escort you out, Catherine added. The police have been notified. The next time you appear here, they will be called immediately. As the guards moved to help Layla up, she looked at her children one last time. Please, she begged, don't let them do this to me. No one is doing anything to you, Mom. Simone's voice was final. This is what you did to yourself. What you taught us to help you do. The only difference is we're finally strong enough to stop participating in our own destruction. They watched as security led Layla out, her protests fading into the morning traffic. Through the lobby windows, they could see her standing on the sidewalk, looking small and lost in a world that no longer bent to her will. The Tokyo investors are waiting in the conference room, Catherine reminded Bryce gently. Right? He turned to his children. Simone, I need those analysis reports by 3. Nathan, how's the new customer service protocol coming along? On schedule. Nathan straightened his tie, not designer, but chosen with honest pride. First phase rolls out next week. Good. Bryce looked at his family, not the false image they'd once projected, but the real, imperfect, honest version they'd become. Let's get back to work. As they moved toward the elevators, Bryce caught a final glimpse of Layla through the windows. She stood alone on the sidewalk, watching as the life she'd thrown away continued without her. But this time, he felt no pain at the sight, no lingering attachment to the woman who'd taught their children that love was worth less than excitement. He had built something new from the ashes of her betrayal. Something stronger, something honest, something real. The elevator doors closed on the past, carrying them up toward a future built on truth instead of lies, on earning instead of taking, on the kind of love that could survive any storm because it was anchored in reality instead of illusion. The reckoning was over. The truth had won.